Hi, this is Jeff Etienne. I'm bringing you my week 5 reflection again via video here. It sounds like you enjoyed it last week, and it really works well, excuse me, for me to kind of cover the things I want in a more meaningful way than maybe writing at times, and maybe it gets you to understand where I'm coming from a little bit better. I was reflecting this week about what I want to do for my final paper. And as I expressed earlier, one of the things that have always intrigued me is some of the key common traits that teachers have. I talked about this a little bit last week as we got in the hiring process. And this week we talked about performance evaluations. I think that you can take a look and look for those key traits. I talked about finding them when you interview prospective teachers. And I think it's something to take a look at when you're evaluating teachers. As I read through the book, through readings this week in Rebor, he talked a lot about, he had examples of different type of evaluation forms in there. And as we did our supervision class, the last class before this, one of the things I struggle with in a lot of the teacher evaluation forms is how much there is to cover in a form. And when you sit down to observe a teacher and see something, it's so hard to see all of that. Like, for example, Minnesota, if you're a probationary teacher, you have 3 professional reviews a year. And how do you really understand where that teacher's coming from and what they can do and cover all that even in just 3 of them? I'm a big proponent of what we called in the last class the 3 or 4 minute walkthrough, and getting through a teacher's classroom multiple times throughout the year, having a chance to possibly visit with students as you talk to students about what are the comments and the observations they make of teachers. Especially when you have new teachers in your building that are probationary teachers, first-year teachers, to get an opportunity just to visit with parents in an informal way, just saying, hey, how's it going for everybody? Mr. Jones' class this year, he says he really enjoys your child, class seems to be going well, how's it going for you? You get a lot of feedback through that, and I developed a form that centers in on those 5 types of areas that I'll probably include as part of my final paper and project as I tie in the hiring process of trying to identify the top candidates and to pursue them. Once you hire those candidates, how do you evaluate the candidates to work with them? And the last thing, tying in professional growth to it, because I think that's one of the key things for district. When you commit to hire that teacher, you hired them because you think they bring qualities to the table. And I want to continue to help them grow those qualities to do things that will help make them a more effective teacher. And I'm a big proponent of lifetime learning. And I do always think I don't know if I mentioned my reflections before, but it seems to be that if you focus in on about 4 to 6 different simple little disciplines every day and in your job and your career in an area that you want to succeed in, that those things seem to make about 80 to 90% of the difference in what you're trying to do. It's just like in teaching, I think that about 80% of successful teaching is tied up in the person part of it, the people skills, the ability to communicate, to show caring, to motivate kids and do that part of it. And that's what I think the evaluation part should look at, but I do think then about 20% is made up of technical skills and knowledge. And I'll cover all that when I get to my final paper. But that was a very interesting area for me to look at. There's so many different forms and ways to do it. We really went in depth into it in the last class. But I get one of the biggest concerns I have that I wanted to mention is kind of this direction we're moving in the state mandated cookie cutter type of evaluation. I think it's important to have some sort of performance tied into what a teacher does. But you don't have any control as a teacher of the kids that you bring in. I think it's important that if you're measured on where they're at and just one test a year and how they perform on that one test, I think that's unfair. I think if you have a chance to take a test like we use NWEA in our district and have a chance to test kids early in the year in the fall and then test the kids that have been with you for that full 8 months, 7.5 months, and look at the growth you've gotten and evaluate based on that, I think that's one tool to be looked at, because I think that is an effective evaluation tool that I think is fair. I haven't studied it that closely, but if you just measure a teacher based on the MCA scores of their students, I don't think that's fair at all. That's the old apples to oranges argument. Then there's enough issues on MCA. But teacher evaluations can become a big issue in the coming years. As on the discussion board you talked about teacher evaluation, what the superintendent's going to do, Mr. Superintendent Union Buster. And I think it's a touchy subject. Teachers are professional. They want to be treated professionally. And I don't think it's very difficult to come up with one evaluation form that fits every teacher in every subject area and determines whether they're quality or not. But I get to meet tenure reasons. You have to have a tool to do that. And I think it's important that a district and a teachers union work closely together to identify the qualities that they want in effective teachers and the skills that they want in effective teachers. And then together, they both work on evaluating teachers to see if they meet those performance standards and help them grow in that area. And if at some point in time there's a teacher that's not proficient, that a professional development plan is developed, and that I know a lot of that's contractual. And I know in our school system we have a complete plan for due process that has to take place before you remove a teacher from the contract. And so I think it's going to be a challenge moving forward in teacher evaluations. And as I put on one of my posts, I think it's going to be difficult to attract teachers in the coming years. I think we're doing things from a governmental standpoint that is not making teaching attractive to our young people wanting to come into the profession. And the data that I've seen, if I remember, like by 2017, I think we're going to have 20,000 new openings for teachers in the state of Minnesota, and that they're anticipating only 7,000 to 8,000 being out there coming out of college to fill those positions. So it's going to become very competitive for school districts to find good candidates because there's not going to be a lot of them out there. It's going to be great for people to get hired, but for you as a district to get the best person possible is going to be a challenge. A couple other things. I talked briefly on integration. I've been trying to get information from our chief of staff in our school district, but she hasn't responded back to me on our district. But that's something I really wanted to dig into this week, but I couldn't get the data and the information on our specific district to really take a look at the bang we're getting for our dollar, whether it's worthwhile. I think we are because we're a very diverse district. And I tried to dig through some of my wife's school board information, but I really can't get direct information on our integration programs, how we spend our integration dollars. I may touch on that another time if I get that information from our chief of staff. The last thing I'll talk on is teacher retirement and contracts. I made my post, one of my areas, writing to Governor Union Basher. I think teacher retirement's a hotbed issue in other states, but as I researched Minnesota, it's a very big, I should say a safe issue to cover because we've been very responsible, especially with the new legislation they put in place back in 2010, is increasing the funding of our pensions in all public employee pensions, the three big ones in the state. And if I remember right, I think the average income retirement for a TRA member is like $53,000 or $54,000. That's not going to create a cushy lifestyle. I don't think it's exorbitant. I think typically our teachers are highly trained, highly educated people that have put in 30, 35, 40 years of service. And to have a retirement, that's one of the benefits that we have there, considering when you take people in other business fields with professional degrees, with licensures or certifications and masters, PhDs, specialist degrees, they typically can make into the six figures easily. I have some of my friends that have a lot less education than me that have been making $150,000 to $300,000 a year in different areas, and they lose jobs, get jobs, lose jobs. They have the ability to have a high-end income standpoint where in teaching you're pretty much limited, and especially in recent times there hasn't been much growth in teaching contracts because of budget constraints in about the last 8 to 10 years. So it's been a tough spot, and I think that the states and school districts are doing very well within their means in contracts to try and make them attractive. But it's going to be a tough thing, and if we start cutting away benefits, taking away the things, and I know in the state of Minnesota there's not a tremendous burden on the taxpayers because the teachers and the districts choose to supplement the teachers. My district, for example, is one of the handful of the ones that have a up to a 3% matching dollar for dollar on a tax sheltered annuity program. I know very few districts in the state have that because the state, I believe, said you couldn't add it. You could keep it if you already had it, but you couldn't put it in new back in the 80s at some point in time. And that really helped Richfield attract a lot of teachers back in the 60s and 70s when they had that opportunity in there when they negotiated it and put it in. So with that, I'll wrap up my reflection for this week and get ready to start working on the final paper. Thanks a lot.